Here to talk about what people whose New Year's resolution is to deal with their relationships, we have Claire and Debbie. Claire, can you introduce yourself and tell us what you do, please?
Hi, I'm Claire Webb and I'm a mediator with Mediation Now.
And Debbie?
I'm Debbie Bulmer and I'm a family lawyer with Family Solutions Now, dealing with collaborative law and traditional legal practice.
So if we can start with you, Debbie, because there is, well, I don't know if it's a myth or true, but there's always a flurry of articles when it comes to the start of any new year about divorce lawyers being inundated with couples who have suffered the Christmas holiday together. What's the reality behind that?
D-Day, I think they call it, don't they?
Oh, yes,
Divorce Day, the day that the law office is open for the first time in the new year. January, February, early part of the year is generally busy than other parts of the year. So we see it sometimes actually in September when the schools go back after any sort of lengthy period where people have had to spend time with each other, which I think says it all really. But
so 2020 really, because I
was going to say January could be quite interesting after 2020. I think it might well depend on where we are in the pandemic by that stage, because you may find that rather than people rushing at the start of the year, they wait until things have settled down before saying, right, okay, now we know where we're at. Now the housing market has settled a little bit, etc. We'll start now. So who knows what's going to happen? It's going to be an interesting one, I think.
What other factors do you think come into play, certainly at the beginning of 2021, but maybe they were always factors and it's become more acute in recent times?
I think the impact that COVID has had on finances generally, so people's pension pots, certainly at the very beginning of the pandemic, just fell through the floor. And I think a lot of people that were investing in stocks and shares, it just wasn't sensible for them to look at getting divorced at that time, or even if they were the ones that held it, wasn't sensible perhaps for their wife to be divorcing them, or the other way around. So it's had quite an effect on people and the decisions that they're making.
Can you talk us briefly through the stages or the process?
In the very early days, and certainly at the very first meeting, we'd be looking at what options are right for you. So we'll cover lots of bases, such as maybe an overview of what your finances are, an overview of what your relationship's like, and then we'll talk about things such as whether mediation might be a nice route, whether the collaborative law route is best for you, whether you want to do things just between solicitors, or whether it's particularly acrimonious, and it's really unusual that we'd look at this as a first step, but whether court proceedings and getting them moving would be right. It is unusual that that's the first thing that would come out of any initial meeting, but there are unusual circumstances where that might be appropriate. So the first one is just about information gathering and option considering.
Has the process changed in 2020? Has it slowed, sped up, become different?
I think as far as procedure is concerned and as far as the process is concerned, we've had more changes in these last 6 months than in the 20 years I've been doing this job. There's always been this intention that the court would move to a more digital platform. But I think most of us that have been doing it for a long time thought, well, yeah, okay, maybe not even in our lifetime. Suddenly in 6 months, we've got a platform that's working for us to issue proceedings online, to file financial orders online. To give you an example, prior to the pandemic, we were submitting financial consent orders that were taking 8, 9, 10, 11 weeks sometimes to come back approved from the court. They're turning them around in around about 7 days right now.
And does that please you or interest you or worry you about accuracy, or is this a good thing?
I think it pleases me because the accuracy is our issue initially, to make sure the financial orders are right. That's our problem, whether we submit it and it takes 11 weeks for a judge to look at it or a week. I think getting used to the technology and the new procedure is going to take a while. I think they're doing what they can at the moment to make justice accessible for as many people as possible, but it's not going to be without teething problems.
Is it an exaggeration to say that maybe there could have been benefits that will improve your profession in the near future rather than long-term future?
I think so. I mean, I think not just the procedural aspect, but certainly as far as court hearings and things are concerned. whilst it hasn't suited everyone, and there's lots of circumstances we've got to be very, very careful with, some of the Zoom and telephone hearings mean that people that ordinarily would have struggled with court and the whole pomp and ceremony of it are finding, actually, I can deal with this in my living room. I'm okay with this, and I know that there's a judge in front of me and there's a barrister there and a barrister there, but I'm in my comfort zone, and whilst I can tell this is serious, I'm not in the sort of place I would be if we were in a courtroom. So it's had some benefits in that respect too.
So moving on to Claire, mediation has now played a crucial, fundamental role in divorce proceedings in recent years. Can you explain where mediation sits within the divorce process?
So you have to consider mediation before you're able to make an application to the court for children or finances. And the reason for that is to make people consider whether they can do it with the help of a mediator rather than needing to spend, one, a lot of money in the court system, and secondly, it tends to be a more adversarial system. It is a judicial system, so someone will tell you what the outcome is. We know that for a lot of people, if you can reach a solution yourself, you're more likely to stick to it. So for children issues, if you can reach your own arrangements, you're more likely to like them than have somebody enforce their view and their opinion on you. So mediation is the first port of call. Some people, however, it's not right for them at the beginning. Like Debbie was saying, there might be reasons why you issue quickly. There may be concerns about assets going missing or anything like that. Or it just might be very, very adversarial and hugely emotional at the beginning. And what people sometimes find is once those proceedings have started, things calm down. There's a timetable, there's control, and then people can come back to mediation at that time and say, actually, we've done all the emergency things, we've done all the things that we had to look at quickly, and now emotion is dissipated because time is a great healer, as we know, and we can now look at trying to agree the next bit ourselves. So there's never a time that mediation shouldn't be considered, and actually all of the rules say that mediation should be considered at each and every point of the process.
Can mediation help us evolve into 2021 by resolving things that have changed, redundancy, unemployment? Do you foresee people coming back to mediation to reassess their lives?
Yes and yes, basically. Yes, I think they will come back because things change, arrangements change. But things do anyway. So although the pandemic has probably exacerbated it and made us even more aware of the changes that are happening, if you made arrangements for your child when they were 2 and you now have gone 10 years later and your child is 12, it's highly unlikely that those arrangements are still suitable for a 12-year-old. So those kinds of things naturally evolve, and people tend to dip back into mediation as and when they need to, or it might be that you agreed that you would defer the house sale for 5 years until the child reached 18, and now you're at that point and you want some help with working through getting valuations, all of those kinds of things to agree how you're going to sell the house. So people always have dipped in and out of mediation and used it to their benefit when they need to. I think it will become even more, well, it has become even more necessary. What happens if one of you has a test positive? Do you keep the child? Does the child remain with the other parent? How do you do that? What kind of things are you going to look at? What if the school shuts down? All of those things that we learned the hard way back in March, April, we at least now have an idea. I'm not saying we know the answers, but we have an idea what it was like. So we can actually say, this bit really worked, and actually this was awful. We can't do that again.
It's worth spending that little bit of money with a professional to maintain that harmony within a family.
Absolutely. It is much harder to build trust back up once trust has gone than to guess what's going to happen, or at least have a plan and talk about the things that you know are likely to occur, and therefore address it in that way.
I don't know what parents do if they live in different parts of the country with the different tiers.
Oh, it's so hard, isn't it? And I think, it will also be, some people will get the vaccinations before others, I'm guessing. I'm guessing if you happen to be working in medicine and in caring, you're going to get the vaccine maybe before your X, and therefore, you know, how is that going to play out? You're going to feel much safer. They may not. You've got issues of whether the schools will stay open. People tend to think that you only have issues when you have young children, and it doesn't work like that. Life doesn't. So, you know, even if you've got a 20-year-old at university, if they're in Durham under the Scottish rules and you're down here, then, you know, do they travel? Do you test? Can they come back down? All of those things. And it just makes a difficult time even harder. And I think most people, I think everyone that I've spoken to about it, say that if you can talk about it, you may not get the right answer. It may not be perfect, but it does feel an awful lot better than sitting at home on your own, trying to guess what that other person is thinking.
And so 2021 is not only going to be busy for you, Claire, but covering issues that you've never covered before. Debbie, what are your predictions for 2021 in the legal profession?
Well, funnily enough, I think it'll be very, very similar in the early stages, but the absolute crucial thing for a lot of us family lawyers this year has been mediation. And the reason that mediation has been so great this year is because a lot of the issues that have arisen are ones that we couldn't predict, we didn't know about, we might have told on a briefing one day, happens the next, and you can get a mediation appointment reasonably quickly. So that one issue can be dealt with. It might be, for example, that if you make an application to the court, by the time you get to court, that issue is changed because new guidelines are in place, or there's another issue. Or the system you were mentioning earlier about being in different tiers. Because a lot of the mediation is being dealt with online by Zoom now, it doesn't matter if you're sat up in Manchester and somebody's in London, it can be done by one mediator. Where I think the issues before with the courts particularly have been, okay, so what is the local court to the child? Are we going to have to travel? Is that going to be an issue? It's less of an issue as far as A, mediation is concerned, but B, actually the courts are concerned because a lot of the hearings are remote. But I think the thing for 2021, as for 2020, because of the changes and because it's so quick with very little warning, is that mediation, and as you said, an hour can just sort out a real niggling issue that might take you through a few weeks of whatever the position is at that point, and then you can review it again. And the more you talk, the more you communicate, the easier it gets to do it.
So it sounds like there is going to be some positives coming out of in 2021. If people want legal advice, Debbie, how can they contact you? So
they can look at us at the website, which is www.familysolutionsnow.co.uk. They can give us a call if they want to, 02392 476049, or they can send me an email. And again, all those details are on the website.
Fantastic. And Claire, if people are wanting mediation, they're divorced, but they need a tune-up, or they've decided they've got an issue they need to talk about, how can they contact you?
So it's www.mediation-now.co.uk, or the telephone number is 02392 481183.